talking to myself again. But it's the only...
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters, and big apologies to everybody who wants a live show. Every now and then I do have to have a social life. I do have to go out, and I am actually out on a Friday. So unfortunately, it's at my office, and it's a socially distanced soiree of about 4 people, I think, is going to be there. Me, the landlord, and the receptionist. So it's within my work bubble. But literally, that's why I couldn't do the show live. So apology to everybody. Normal service will be resumed next week. But big good evening to Steve, Hasty, and to Mitch. Great to see you, lads. As always, plenty to talk about, and got maybe 1 or 2 guests lined up for tonight if they can make it at some point. But let's talk COVID first, Mitch. And COVID hit Newcastle United big style. We lost our game against Aston Villa, and as we said, typical Newcastle to go first, but they did. But it looks as if the cloud is lifting, and it looks as if we've got a game on Saturday now.
It certainly does. I get why some people are frustrated about numbers not being released and what have you, but obviously they're not going to release personal details of people's medical conditions. That's not going to happen unless they choose to do so themselves via their own personal social media. I think it just shows how delicate the whole situation still is for sport. Like we said last week, Denver Broncos had to play an entire game with no quarterback, and we could have been in that situation. We could have just been told by the Premier League, do you know what, you've got 14 players and 2 goalkeepers, crack on you go. And I think it's quite fair that they haven't. I think we're lucky that Crystal Palace haven't picked anybody up, any cases up after the game. Looking ahead to West Brom, I think the only concern as such is that how much training have the group had together, but should that be terribly relevant for a group of professional footballers who theoretically should know what they're doing? I think it's it certainly is the tip of a potential iceberg. I know Brighton came close to having a game called off earlier on in the season, and it just shows you how delicate it really is. And if you look at, say, England's one-day internationals have now been called off in South Africa on the basis of 2 potential positives, which turned out to be false positives. But there was obviously some breakdown in their isolation, in their bubble, or bubbles, if you will. And I think this won't be the first, it won't be the last this season, I don't think.
No, I think you're right, and as I say, hopefully Newcastle's got it out the way, and that can, that little particular episode can move behind. But Steve, it's, I think, we all scratch our heads when Newcastle don't tell us things. It's the most frustrating thing at times, being a Newcastle fan, lack of communication from the owners and the powers that be. But yeah, it's probably simply down to the fact that medical records are private, and Malcolm and Gibbo made the point yesterday's show about essentially the lads potentially maybe don't want their family knowing. Kids, they might have kids, and if it's all over the newspapers that this player's got an infection or whatever, suddenly it hits home that, there's an infection at the football club. It's a kind of thing that we have to deal with as parents during a pandemic. So, maybe it's as simple as that. And, Newcastle are probably being criticised maybe a little unfairly on this occasion.
Yeah, I think so. You remember the days, guys, when we used to find out the news at 3:30, 4 o'clock on an evening when we were walking through town and picking up a Chronicle. That's what it used to be like. Now we want to know every single thing immediately.
Everything yesterday.
Beforehand. Yeah, if not beforehand. And yeah, you're dead right, Steve, when it comes to putting stories out, and you have to be very, very careful. We also have an awful lot more overseas players than occurred in the past. So you've got to think of the communication aspect, and their families finding out on the media, as you say before. The players themselves would have even managed to tell family members if they were, living in distant shores. So it doesn't really matter to us. It doesn't make any difference to us whether player X, player Y, or player Z has tested positive. It's not really our business to know when it comes to that. If it's somebody's out with a hamstring injury or an ACL or something like that, that's slightly different. But with this, and like you say, with everything that's been going on, the bubble, the breakdown in the bubble that may or may not have occurred, the investigations that have to go on to find out what's caused the breakdown. There's a lot of fingers can be pointed in a lot of directions. As soon as you announce that one player has it and another player didn't, we know what social media would be like. People will be saying, "Oh, they'd seen so and so at the chip shop, they'd seen so and so at the local bookies, or you name it," and they'll be starting to investigate and querying which player was out, which player wasn't out, and at the end of the day, we've got a game on Saturday, a 3:00 kickoff. Believe it or not, something not that it makes any difference to us, of course, but that even a 3:00 kickoff was a rarity when we were going into St James's Park. Never mind during these COVID-infected times.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? 3:00 kickoffs. I mean, it used to be the norm. Now you struggle to get one due to the way the TV and Sky in particular runs the fixture list. It really is crazy. Briefly going away from Newcastle and just looking at the England World Cup draw, found it quite interesting, really, in the sense that we've got Poland again. I mean, I'd love to know the stats, how many times we actually get Poland in World Cup draws, but we got Poland, Hungary, Albania, Andorra, San Marino. That's as good as a bye, Mitch, isn't it, really, that group?
It should be, but, with England like Newcastle, you never know. You're right about Poland, but I would add Hungary and San Marino into that. I think we pick out Hungary, San Marino, and Poland. When I saw that draw, it was like, Christ, it's deja vu. We've had all of those teams on multiple occasions. Poland seem to be one we get frequently, more frequently than the rest, but certainly Hungary and San Marino we've had more than our fair share of as well. I think you've got to look at current form. In terms of a group, you couldn't have asked for better. I think. I don't think Poland are pulling up trees as second seeds. Hungary certainly have waned in the last few years. And then we've got a collection of teams that we really should see off with a C team, which might sound arrogant, but let's be realistic. Look at what we've got in the squad at our availability, who we keep being told are world-class players. Well, let's step up and see you do it. Let's step up and see you put 6 past San Marino. Let's step up and see you put the second seeds in the group, Poland away, twice home and away, and do it with a bit of grace and a bit of ease and a bit of class. And I don't think that's putting undue pressure on. I just think that's the realistic scene of it. The Polish league these days is not what it was. It's not full of very, very strong teams. I was reading a story about a lad who 6 years ago was picking Celeriac in England because it made him more money than playing football in Poland, and he's now the second top scorer in the Polish first division. That's what we're playing. With no disrespect to him, because you've got to say fair play to you for biting the bullet and saying, well, I can earn more money doing that in England than I can doing what I love. But then he found his passion for football in England again, which I think is a fabulous story. I mean, I'm sure he won't be involved in the Polish national teams, but that's this potential gulf in quality that we've got there. I would never say it's as good as a buy, but it's as good as we could have asked for, that's for sure.
Definitely, yeah, Steve. I think San Marino always cast back to the memories of the guy who ended up. I don't think he has to buy a pint in San Marino, and I think he got a car for scoring after about 35 seconds as he steamed past Stuart Pearce, who wasn't the quickest at the best of times, and fired in past Peter Shilton in nets to make it 1-0 to San Marino. But I think the final score was 7-1. But yeah, I mean that's the first thing that comes to mind about that. With Poland, of course, it's that infamous game in the 70s. I'm too young to remember it, but where the goalkeeper had been called a clown and went on to have the best game.
Cloughy, yeah.
By Cloughy, went on to have the best game ever at Wembley. You know, it's just stuff that history's made up. But yeah, also my memories of Poland, probably the earliest one is Gary Lineker stroking in those goals as Peter Beardsley ably assisted him in '86. You know what I mean? So there's so many memories. But yeah, it's looking at that group, and I'll just get it up again just so you know. Poland, obviously Hungary, Albania, Andorra, and San Marino is the group. It looks like a formality for England.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the days when people talked about we're not having to play the likes of Andorra and San Marino. You know, there was going to be a competition where those clubs played among themselves, or those countries played among themselves, and then we ended up, the winners of a smaller group would then come into the main draw because we had too many international games. Now we're in a situation where every international break now we seem to play 3 games instead of 2. You know, we 3 games into 6 days and things like that. But going back to Poland, I mean, that infamous sort of 1973 in the qualifying for the '74 World Cup, which was a strange World Cup in itself, and a demise of the Brazilians at that particular time. You know, we saw probably the worst Brazilian team that had ever stepped on a football pitch during that particular tournament. But Tomaszewski in goal, who had the most amazing game. I think it was who was it? Was it Leto or somebody like that? I think he was called some strange name. Who stroked the ball past, and it was both that game and the following game mistakes by players. I think it was Norman Hunter that was caught in possession on the halfway line, dilly-dallying with the ball, put his foot on it, and then actually got tackled because he wasn't aware of what he was doing, and the lad went through and scored. And then I think, if I remember rightly, I think it was Poland that saw off Bobby Moore. I think we played Poland in '75, I think, which was for the qualifying for the European Championships. And I think, if my memory serves me right, both him and Alan Ball, I think, did Bowley get sent off? Or, there was something strange happened there. And I think, again, Moore was caught in possession with the ball. And the player went through and scored. And I think it was that point when the press turned on Bobby Moore and said he was finished as a footballer. I think he left West Brom and left West Ham, went to home, and then ended up playing in the cup final. But it just goes to show how the press, when it comes to England, if you have a bad game, they'll destroy you. In San Marino, of course, as you say, Stuart Pearce, that infamous back pass. The shortest back pass I think you've ever seen. Certainly the back pass with absolutely no power in it, and a stranded Peter Shilton wondering what the hell was going on. I mean, they rallied and ended up beating them 7-1 in the end. But I don't know about you two, but I have no interest in England qualifying games and stuff like that. It's not until you get to the tournament that you start to pay any attention. And I think partly that's because of the number of ridiculous friendlies we've had to play recently as well. Once the tournament's over and you've been disappointed, it all just goes by the wayside. And supporting Newcastle, supporting England, it's we're used to it now. And I've always felt as though the Newcastle results and England results tended to follow a sequence of building you up to pull the car from under your feet. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, Lewandowski, there's your danger man. If he's on form for the Poles, and we have a few injuries up front, if Harry Kane wasn't playing, for example, or Rashford, or one or two of the others, then we may suddenly find ourselves in a bit of a precarious position, especially if he's still on fire, because that guy, for the last 4, 5, 6 seasons, just been hammering goals in for fun. So maybe he's on my boxing games.
He's also like one of those players though. Like Poland seem to have a world-class player in every generation.
Yeah.
But only one, not a team full of them. I think of Boniek.
I was just going to say
who I would put into any best world 11 ever. For me, I used to love watching him play at Juve, loved watching him play anytime I got the chance to. But he played in a team that were also Rans, and that's what Lewandowski's doing at the moment as well.
Yeah.
You know, he's not playing at Bayern Munich when he plays with his national team.
That's
So,
right. You're right. And also, when he's played for the national team, he hasn't exactly put in some sterling performances, has he? Certainly when they've got the
No.
championships, he's disappeared, which is really strange whether he was carrying injury or played too many games. But he's certainly on fire.
But I also can't understand how we've ended up with San Marino and Andorra in the same group. You know, Andorra's got a similar population to Gateshead. You know, realistically, and like Steve says, that they floated this idea of a pre-qualifying group that somehow got chucked out, and I don't understand that, because realistically, in modern football now, what is the point of those games? They're pointless games where somebody's key centre forward or somebody's centre back could get injured in a stupid challenge by some kid from Andorra going over the top because he's just pumped up, you know, or they're doing journeys depending on when the qualifiers are and depending on what the COVID situation is. You know, we were talking about our COVID situation, how much of that might have been exacerbated by players being away on international duty and coming back. Because, you know, we've got a club doctor who's been at the cutting edge of prevention, and yet we're the first team to actually have a game called off for it.
Yeah.
So, you know, that you've got to wonder, where's it falling apart? And my first thing at the point is 3 bloody internationals in the middle of a week. And actually, we were stamping our feet about Wilson and Darlow not getting a call up. It's probably a bloody good job they didn't.
Yeah. Talking about international football, we lost another legend this week, and again, very, very young, Paolo Rossi. I mean, it doesn't get much better than a hat-trick in international football, but a hat-trick against Brazil. Not many people have done that, lads.
No. And also a hat-trick coming back after what was a 2-year ban. You know, he hadn't played any football until about, I think the ban got cut short. It was going to be a 3-year ban. It got cut short. I think he played for 6 months, getting himself fit. He came into that World Cup and nobody expected him to be even playing for the Italians. You know, I was surprised that he got picked, and then a surprise that he got selected in the first 11. But he just clicked in that tournament, whether he had something to prove, and that showed the quality of the man. But he was just outstanding in that competition, you know.
Absolutely.
But he was a beautiful footballer. He was at that particular time in the early 80s, you know, from about 79, 80, 82, and there was some fantastic footballers around in Europe. But he was the highest paid footballer in the world. That was amazing, you know. And yet, when you look at the players that were around him, whether that was because of who he played for. You know, the fact that Italian football was really, really at the top of its game financially at that particular point. But he was a great player to watch. He could glide with a ball. He knew where the net was. And I mean, after his career was over, he had a fantastic career on Italian TV. You know, it was sort of almost like not quite the Gary Lineker of Italian football, but in terms of media, but more like an Alan Shearer and you know, giving his point of view over and very articulate. And it's very sad to hear at only 64-year-old that he's passed away. And you know, as you say, another great. You know, we're losing Maradona, and then you look back and it's only a couple months ago that we lost in this country. We lost Jack Charlton as well. You know, so you know. I know we're all getting older, and we know, you know, but we tend to think of these players as not getting older. We remember the performances when they were playing, you know. And when it said that he was 64-year-old, my first thought was, what, 64? Yeah, mate, I didn't think he was that old. And then I look back and thought, well, he's 82 and he was 20 years old, and you know, it's like that's the way it is, isn't it? You know.
No, that was the first World Cup I can properly remember watching games. You've heard me dad talk about his Uncle Tom. Well, I used to go to his Uncle Tom's after school when I was, you know, between a couple of certain ages. And he actually, on at least 3 occasions come and got me from school early so we could watch games together. And so that tournament is my first proper memory of watching a World Cup and getting interested in the international teams and understanding who was who. And Rossi was just like, I hadn't seen a striker like that before. You know, you expect to see stuff from the Brazilians, from the Argentinians that you haven't seen before. But Italy had this reputation of being, you know, the catenaccio, lock the back door, you play on the break. But he was just something unlike I'd ever seen before. It was fascinating to watch him. And, you know, that's where you fall in love with international football and international players and seeing something different to what you see at home in England. And yeah, it's sad. You're right about him being like a media personality. Wasn't he involved with James Richardson at the very start of the Channel 4 Italia coverage as well? Yeah. You know, and so made an impact. You know, was still making an impact. He's one of those players that in Italian football, in spite of his misdemeanors, he was still worshipped, which sounds a lot like Maradona, doesn't it? And that probably is the measure of the player.
Yeah, no, I agree. We always like to have guests on the show, and last week we talked briefly about a subject that was in the news, which of course was dementia. And got a lovely message from a guy on LinkedIn, Chris Packham. He was interested in our discussion on dementia, and he said that he felt that the problem is a lot more serious than was discussed. Well, of course, we said last week none of us are doctors, and we're always happy to. None of us are doctors about dementia, but it's always good to have people on. And Chris, we invited Chris onto the show to discuss it. So good evening, Chris. How are you, mate?
Fine, thanks. Yeah. I was
great.
I was going to make some general points and then pick up on what Malcolm and John Gibson said. So, I mean, if you want to sort of interject, and Steve and Mitch interject as well, that would help.
Yeah, no problem, Chris. Look, just for our regular viewers, just give us a little bit of background. I mean, on your bio it said you were a researcher and a writer, but is this something you've studied in your spare time, or is it something you've studied in your like a professional capacity?
This stuff about football and dementia is a hobby, so yeah, spare time thing.
Okay, good stuff.
I do have a background in research, and I did train as a teacher. So I mean, I don't know, whereas your sort of background might be acting and stuff like that in these sort of podcasts, I'm very much into research and sort of looking into things.
Great stuff. Go on then, fire away, Chris. We'll sit and listen. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I didn't realise actually quite how serious this football and dementia problem was. It goes back to the mid-90s. I read about Danny Blanchflower. I think he died in 1993. So I read about him, and then I read about Jeff Astle in 2002. But it wasn't until early 2017 when I read about Chris Sutton's dad, who's got dementia. And there was also an article about Brandy Chastain, who's the American women's football player. And she'd actually decided that she was actually going to donate her brain to science. So I really sort of picked up on it in early 2017. I realised quite how serious this was. And then I looked into it a bit more, and I realised that there's a whole range of teams that have had players with dementia. You've got the Aston Villa team. I think they won the FA Cup in 1957. You've got the Tottenham team. I think they won the league and the cup in 1961. You've got the Liverpool team of 1964. And then, of course, you've got the England team of 1966. I just recently read about this Burnley team. I think they won the league in 1960. And 7 out of the 11 players have had dementia. I mean, that gives you sort of indication about quite how serious this is. It's also another article I was reading in the Mail talks about 500 players, possibly 500 professional players, I assume, having dementia. So yeah, I mean that gives you an indication of the scale of the problem. I mean, the problem is now you've got players in the 70s. Think of John Tudor and John McNamee. They've been mentioned in the Chronicle. So you've got two players from the early 70s who played for Newcastle with a diagnosis of dementia. So, I mean, my guess is you're going to get players in the 70s, 80s, and 90s having this problem.
What do you think it is then, Chris? I mean, you know, are we seeing that heading the ball is something which is causing dementia? Because Malcolm and John's opinion about this was people get dementia when they get older. And, you know, I suppose what we need to find out is, you know, is heading a football going to, you know, increase the problem? Is it gonna create the problem? What's actually, what is actually the cause of it? And I suppose until we get to the root cause of it, then we're not gonna know whether heading a football enhances it. I'm a professional boxing promoter. That's one of the hats that I wear. I would say, then surely anyone who gets punched in the head on a regular basis, and I mean, let's think about professional boxing here for a moment. Professional fighters probably go anything from, say, 15 fights. Those who have a good career go from 15 fights, maybe up to 35 on average. So one would imagine there would be a lot of boxers and retired boxers who would probably have dementia. So I suppose that would be a good place to start, because I would say that a punch into someone's head or regular punishment in someone's head is gonna be quite damaging. Would you agree on that?
The only thing I know about boxing is that there's a scientist in America called Anne McKee, and she's looked at, I think, American footballers' brains, but also one boxer's brain, Paul Pender. I don't know if you've heard of Paul Pender.
No, I haven't.
He won a version, I think, won the middleweight title against Sugar Ray Robinson about 1960. Right. And his wife actually donated his brain to science. I think he died 2002. And I think he was 72 then. And that's perhaps one of the only cases we've actually got of a boxer with dementia. And the scientists actually being able to really look at it and examine it in detail. And she's almost said, this is my sort of, I think they call it like a case zero, where you can compare all other cases against this. I mean, the trouble is that I think it's the same with football, that you haven't really got the brains to look at. And that's what this Will Stewart, who's the scientist in Glasgow, is trying to get. He needs more brains to look at, to find out the extent of the problem. I mean, going back to what you were saying about football, I think there's two things. I think you've got the head impacts, like you had the recent collision, which is the Raul Jimenez and David Luiz. Yeah. And then you had a similar collision, Ryan Mason and Gary Cahill a few years ago. So you've got those sort of collisions. I mean, you've got elbows to the head, head-to-head contacts, that sort of thing. So you've got that sort of range of head impacts, but then you've got the heading itself. I mean, I'll pick up on a point that John Gibson made about the heading of the ball. I mean, you need to look at the speed of the ball in particular. You need to look at the force that's actually impacted on the footballer's head. So if you've got the weight of the ball, you've got to multiply that by the speed squared, and then that gives you the force. So you've really got to look at the speed of the ball. The old heavy ball may not have actually been travelling very fast. I mean, there's a goal which Jeff Astle scored. And the ball's coming over from the left, and then he heads it. It doesn't actually look as though it's actually travelling that fast. So the force or the impact of that header may not have actually been that great. I mean, it could actually be that the newer ball is just as much of a problem because it's travelling through the air really quickly. The force actually could be higher than the older ball, especially if you've got players who are fitter and are able to sort of run faster and kick the ball quicker. That actually could be a problem in terms of the impacts and the consequent brain injury. So my concern would be that the current footballers could even be at a greater risk. because of the speed of the ball and more force on the player's head. So
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is. Go on, Steve. Give us your views on what you've heard. And Chris, I just want to thank you for your very clear description of that, but also your research and offering to come on the show. Steve, it throws up an interesting debate. There was a fantastic show done, was it last year or the year before, by Alan Shearer, looking at this. He was one of the first big professional footballers to take this seriously. We've heard, obviously, Chris has mentioned it, Jeff Astle, the Chris Sutton situation with his father, and now, obviously, Bobby Charlton, it's hit him, it hit Jack Charlton. Is it something we need to be looking at a lot more at? Is it something that the Premier League, the PFA, should be looking at more clearly now?
Well, it's certainly something that the PFA should be looking at, and I think that's one of Chris Sutton's big gripes. And I think he was on a committee, and he's walked away from that committee because he feels as though the head of the PFA, the chairman, Taylor, hasn't taken it seriously. I think
he's about as much use as a box of bloody
he is,
fire guard, isn't he?
Exactly. I mean, what you're saying about the football there, Chris, the speed of the ball is very, very interesting, because most people just think of the weight of the ball. And everybody goes on about the heavier football. I think the weight of the football, it remains exactly the same as it was back in the day. The fact that it just got wet during a game because it was made out entirely out of leather, and how much dubbing you had placed on that ball to keep it from absorbing the damp and the water off the pitch or in the rain. But what's also interesting is that I think one of Chris Sutton's gripes was not just the very aspect of the injuries that have been sustained, but the lack of any decency from the PFA towards care for those particular people, providing the care that those players need and the support that their families have needed. These families have just been left to their own devices, if you like. And I think it's only now, with the pressure of the likes of Chris Sutton, seeing what happened to his father, Jeff Astle's daughter, who's ran an amazing campaign, where we're actually seeing not just that. And then I watched a program just the other day. It was on the national news of a player, an old gentleman from, I think it was Scunthorpe, that he played for, and he was in his 70s, and it was obvious that he had dementia. And his daughter was saying, we have absolutely no support whatsoever from the PFA, from his union. He's paid his subs all the way through his life, and they've received absolutely no help with any of the daycare or any arrangements like that, or the PFA hasn't put anything in place to support the families, and those families are just left to the NHS and they're left to the local authority, in the same way as it would be if it had happened to you or I or Mitch or Steve, where we had this illness simply because of unfortunate circumstances, metaphysically or biologically or whatever you want to call it, But the speed of the ball, I think that's a fascinating one. It's something I've never ever heard before, and I'd be interested in what Mitch's opinion on is it, especially from a medical side.
Different types of impact, Steve.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, when you look at brain injury, what you've got to think of is your brain's a jelly in a box, and if you slap that box, that jelly wobbles and that causes damage. And that's the basis of concussion, for starters. And if you were to have a jelly in a box and give the box a slap, look how long it reverberates for after you've slapped it. And that's part of the problem with brain injury. And it's why I've been involved in the study looking at American football and mouthguard use as part of the concussion protocols. Does a mouthguard, a properly fitted mouthguard, reduce concussion? Because the theory is, if you get tackled playing American football, that's your first impact. Your second impact is you hitting the ground. And then your third impact is your teeth clattering against each other and jamming your jaw into the base of your skull and giving a third impact onto the brain while it's already wobbling like hell. And so they're looking at ways that to stop that. Potentially, that could be the difference between you getting a concussion or not. Speed of impact is something else that probably creates a different type of impact injury. For me, we need really good data. The first thing we need is to say, right, we've got all these football teams with all these players who are getting dementia. As humans, we are programmed to look for patterns. We'll look for patterns in numbers. And actually, part of true randomness are patterns. And so we sometimes assign patterns to things that we just shouldn't assign to. So the first thing we need to ascertain is, are these numbers within these teams significantly different statistically to the general population of people who get dementia? And that's the first port of call. And that's probably the most easiest one to do. To say, right, are these guys now at a higher risk of dementia before you start looking at why? Then you come to the why. Is it speed of impact? Is it type of impact? Is it the ball type? Is it whatever? I'll tell you why they should get interested in it, though, as a body, both the FA, the PFA, UEFA, FIFA. Bearing in mind, I've spoken at a FIFA medical conference, and I know how hard it is to get them interested in anything. It's super hard, unless you're one of their relatives or you've got a ton of cash in your back pocket. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. And so we need to get them interested, because if you look at rugby union at the moment, there's currently a class action being made against various rugby football unions by former players. One of them, Steve Thompson, World Cup winner, who claims he can't remember any one of his games in the World Cup he won.
Wow.
Can't remember any of them.
Yeah. And that was 2013. That was 2003. Sorry, 2003.
And you've got a 41-year-old ex-Welsh international flanker who has early onset dementia. And if you look at some of the games he's played where he's taken severe blows to the head and played on, that needs investigated. A lot of these things are super complicated. I look at something like, and obviously, as you guys know, I have a very personal interest in something like Alzheimer's. And I know there's actually dental links to Alzheimer's from my job. There's a statistical link between active gum disease and Alzheimer's disease. And it's all about inflammation. So there's another complication. Are these guys more prone to brain injuries of a different type because of other injuries or conditions they pick up in their day-to-day training, injuries, playing, what have you? Some of these things are super complex, and it really does need filtered out. But for me, the first protocol's got to be, let's look at the data in terms of general population versus professional footballers. And if there's a statistically significant increase, and I know it certainly sounds like there is anecdotally without actually having statistics with active P numbers that prove it. And certainly if you were to push me on it, I'd say, yeah, there's something going there that we really have to investigate rather urgently. Because why are American football doing so much about concussion at the minute? Because they're waiting to be hammered by a load of class action lawsuits. Yeah. Why are the Rugby Football Union now jumpy? Because there's a class action lawsuit coming. And there'll be a big one from the professional footballers eventually. And everybody in football, including the PFA, who've done absolutely nothing about it and don't even seem like they care, they could be on the receiving end of it too, because you didn't look after our players. And so, it's something we really need to look at. The other factor that everybody's talking about is it because you're introducing heading too young? Do you introduce heading above a certain age or below a certain age? And because young developing brains are very different than mature adult brains in terms of how they suffer injury and also how they recover from injury. And again, I've got another personal reason to be interested in that. And having seen how somebody I know recovered from a brain condition almost like magic when he was given the right treatment.
Yeah, good stuff.
And I think if I was given that treatment, I wouldn't recover that way because I'm nearly 50.
Yeah.
But and so there's these things are never simple. They're never black and white. There's so much grey in there. And what we'll have to do is have a dedicated team of people who know where they're at in terms of a medical position, know where they're at in terms of statistical and research position, and devise a set of parameters whereby they analyse all of this and start to filter some of the stuff out, so it becomes easier to come to a definitive conclusion that says this is statistically totally right, this is what's going on, and this is how we need to combat it. Because these things are so emotive. Dementia, such an emotive thing. Watching somebody disappear in front of your eyes while they're still living and breathing must be one of the hardest things to watch. Must be one of the hardest things to live with day in, day out. And no wonder it's emotive.
Yeah.
And again, you guys know where I'm coming from on that one. Yeah. We need the data. We need the data. And we need somebody within football to be interested enough in getting that data. And that's where it's falling down for me at the moment.
I think what we also need to do is we need to make sure that we don't get deflected from football by the comparisons to other sports. And we mentioned boxing right at the start, Steve, and you know as well as I do in boxing that boxers, the majority of time in training, are protecting themselves or are doing training in a particular way, and even if they're wearing a head guard, they're very rarely getting punched in the head continuously. Unlike the footballer who is spending potentially hours and hours on the football pitch every week in training, heading the football, totally unprotected. So the whole idea of boxing is to avoid having your head hit.
Yes.
It's not to be hitting the head, you know.
That kind of loses your fights, really. Yes.
Right. You're also, you're being hit by someone wearing a 12-ounce glove, and you're avoiding it, and you're moving and being hit at the same time. But it's only in the fight itself, in the majority of times, that you're getting hit in the head. Whereas the footballer, it's 6 days a week in training, 2 hours a day, running around, heading the ball continuously, practicing with defending corners, defending free kicks, attacking corners. So we shouldn't. Whatever happens, they've got to make sure that they don't try and just run comparisons and hide behind another sport. Whether it's football, whether it's rugby, boxing, American football, or any other sport where head injuries. I read even a young girl who was in a not a bobsleigh, but one of those down on the tea tray, sliding down a track, and she suffers from a brain injury, sustained because she actually lifted her head 2 centimeters higher than she should have when she was going around the track. On a tea tray, leaning back with your head up, trying to look where you're going.
The other challenge we've got in football is how FIFA's medical committee work. And again, I've had a little bit of insight into that, about how they report injuries and what they think of as injuries. If you go to a player assessment chart, FIFA's name is all over one of the player assessment charts. You can Google it, go and find it. It's a PDF form. You download it. It's got Glasgow Coma scale assessment on it, and it's got 2 or 3 other assessment scales on it. It should take 10 minutes to do. There's absolutely no way that David Luiz had a 10-minute assessment during that game when he had the head injury. Not at all. He was back on with a magic sponge and a bandage on his head within about 2 minutes. So he hasn't had that. And so I had doctor friends of mine saying, hey, I've got this form and it's got FIFA on the top. What's going on there? And FIFA basically would turn around and say, yes, we endorse this assessment and we've passed it on to other bodies and they should be enforcing it. UEFA will say, yeah, we've passed it around all the FAs under our jurisdiction, but it's up to them to enforce it. Premier League will say, yeah, we got that assessment thing. We've given it all the clubs. It's up to the clubs to endorse it. And they just pass it on down and pass it on down and pass it on down. The other thing they don't do is if they only record an injury if it forces you to miss the next training session, which is why in my field of sports dentistry, often many of the injuries are underreported because they can train at the next session. So it doesn't get reported. Massively underreported, actually. So, for example, when Shola Amiobi put, what's his name? The big tall lad, Peter Crouch,
Yeah.
Shola put Peter Crouch's teeth into about 6 different positions. Crouch trained at the next training session. Not reported. Not reported. And you've just got to watch the pictures of him walking off the pitch, minus a tooth, and with 3 others in about 12 different angles. You know, and you can see it. You don't have to search hard for it. Just Google the picture. You know, and but that wasn't reported as an injury. And God knows how many concussions or concussion-type injuries or brain injuries or head injuries have just gone massively underreported. And that's the flaw in how football runs and manages injuries. They're only interested in muscular injuries that'll keep you out for 6 weeks. They're not interested in something that might make you feel a bit giddy for a few minutes, but actually might turn you into a vegetable about 20 years down the line.
Because it wasn't reported as well, Mitch, he ended up getting Shergar's teeth, didn't he?
Well, I've got to say, I would love to have 5 minutes in a room with a dentist that did that. But that's another matter.
So, Chris, fantastic debate, and you've heard what Mitch and Steve have had to say. Anything you would like to add to that before we say goodbye to you?
Yeah, I've got a few more bits to add, actually. I mean, Mitch was talking about the data. Well, I mean, there was this big study from Glasgow University, and they were talking about Alzheimer's disease in former footballers being 5 times more prevalent, motor neuron disease being 4 times worse, Parkinson's twice as worse, and dementia generally being about 3.5 times as bad.
Okay, so they're the studies we need more of, Chris. We need loads of data like that to turn around, because that's the only thing the football authorities will listen to, is if somebody's got a pile of papers like this and goes, read that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was a really big study. I mean, proper refereed paper. You would have thought that more would have been made out of it, you know?
No, it's not how they work, Chris. It's not how they work, mate. You've got to strong on them. You've got to go in. We had, as sports dentists, there was a group of 6 who were the first ever dentists to speak to a FIFA medical conference, and it was here in Dubai, 2017, 2018. And that took us 3 years to set up. 3 years of badgering and haranguing and providing data and providing numbers and providing assessments. That's how they work. And you've got to bully them. You've got to put them in a position where they can't say no, where they can't deny what you're putting in front of their nose is real. And that's the problem we've got, Chris, is I love the stuff you're putting out here, because that's the stuff I love with my geek head on. When I get sent data from my mate Tanos in Athens, who's currently working with Olympiakos, Panathinaikos and Atromitos, and he sent me some data to analyse a couple of months ago, and he wouldn't tell us what the data was. He just wanted me to analyse the numbers and say, is this data right? And it turns out the data was professional footballers with impacted wisdom teeth are 25% more likely to get a hamstring injury. And we don't know why, but the data made sense. And this is the thing, we need somebody somewhere to start to do these sort of statistics on a massive scale, so you can turn around to FIFA and go, bang, there you go, there's the data, get on it. You can turn around to the Premier League and go, there's the data, you need to be looking into this now before a group of players turn around and sue you for millions of pounds. Because that's
the point.
Chris, I agree totally.
I mean, it's going to end up in the courts. It's going to be a complete.
Of course, it is.
It's sad, but that's where it's going. I mean, this was a big study, this Glasgow study. I mean, thousands of people. I mean, I think it took 2-3 years. I mean, I think they're talking about.
But it's still one, and that's the problem, Chris. It's still one.
But I mean, if you've got 500 professional players in England and Wales, then a similar study in England and Wales is going to be similar, isn't it?
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But we need the data analysed with P numbers less than 0.001 or something like that to really turn around to them and go, you can't argue this data. When it's one study, they will.
But, I mean,
I know they will. From personal experience, I know they will. This is the thing, mate.
Yeah.
And so if we've got somebody like you who can trawl through where the data's coming from and pull stuff together, that says, right, we've now got a body of evidence. Once you've got a body of evidence, it's pretty hard to argue against. Because that's where modern medicine should be coming from, is from a point of view of evidence. So if you've got an absolute pile of it, people haven't got an argument. You can't say no. And that's the kind of thing. So we maybe, as a group of fans around the world, we maybe need to be going to more places and more medical institutions. And maybe idiots like me, people in medical professions who are passionate about football, should be turning around to our colleagues and saying, hey, we need to do more about this. We need to see more about this. This is not just interesting data, this is important data. Because as we've seen from some of the oral health studies in sport, there's actually data then you can pull out of that and apply to the general population too. Yeah. We've now got data on oral health and general health that if you take an elite group athlete and make them orally fit, they perform better. That's a statistical fact. And the data that came out of that could then turn around and say, actually, we've got all these associations between oral health and general health, and some of these things can apply to the population. So a male between the age of 25 and 54 who's got active gum disease is twice as likely to have a heart attack. And that came out of sports dentistry data. That didn't come out of other data. That came from the guys looking at the sports dentistry data going, hang on a minute, what's this connection? And then it went off in another direction. And that's exactly the kind of thing we could be taking data like this in the football field, looking at dementia and brain injury and saying, right, where does this go in the general population? How do we apply this to the general population? Where are the links? Where are the associations? And I don't care whether something is directly causative, a strong association or a general link. If there is an association that is significantly statistically associative with another condition, we need to act on it. We need to act on it. And I'm not here as a general practitioner to worry about whether it's directly causative or just a general association. You need to deal with it. You need to get it out of the equation. And that's exactly what we need to be doing with this sports data. And that's why people like you digging through the archives, digging through data, pulling up papers are so important, because it's these voices that eventually sometimes lead somewhere.
Well, I mean,
sorry, I've been on a bit of a rant again, sorry.
There's an article in the Mirror and it's talking about some study from 1966. I mean, I've got something else from the Mail. I mean, it talks about players from the 65-66 season. And apparently dementia was a factor in 42% of their deaths. I mean, that's just a newspaper study, but I mean...
But again, it warrants further investigation, and this is what we need.
It's fascinating stuff, Chris. I want to thank you for reaching out, mate, and I think we should keep in touch. Yeah. And I think as things progress, or if you stumble across another gem like you have tonight, then I think you could just give us a shout, and we'll more than happily have you back on, Chris. But if you don't mind coming on and talking about this in the future, that would be great to keep in touch. Great stuff, Chris. Chris, have a good Christmas, mate. Take care, and thanks for reaching out.
Brilliant, Chris. Take care, mate. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye. Great to have Chris on, and just shows you when you talk about something on NUFC Matters, people do listen and they do reach out, and it's always good to get someone who's clearly, Mitch, put a lot of hard work and effort into that particular field, and by his own admission, he's not an expert, but he's doing what we've been doing with the takeover for the last 6 months.
Can I tell you now, probably somebody who's done more insight and research than some of the bloody sports medicine individuals involved in the Premier League, because to be honest with you, that's so hard to get through to. I can't express how hard that is. Tanos, who's the chair of the European Academy of Sports Dentistry, and I work quite closely with Tanos, he took 3 years to get us into a FIFA medical conference, even though we had some ridiculous data and superb data. We had to not just knock on the door, we had to kick the bloody thing in. Mm-hmm. If we'd had a generous sponsor, I think we'd have been straight in.
Yeah, great stuff. We will have Chris back on again. Fantastic insight,
please,
and we will thank him for that. And maybe he's introduced you to on LinkedIn as well, mate. He's on there, and it would be good for you to keep in touch with him, I think.
I'm not anymore. It's just become some sort of weird Facebook thing out here, and I can't be arsed with it.
Nah, no, bro. I keep forgetting. I keep forgetting you're not in the heart of Newcastle anymore, mate. I keep forgetting. We are trying to get Billy Costine on, who's an author and he's a good friend of ours. And he was going to come on and plug his book, but he's having technical issues trying to get on. And he did a book called The Flight of a Magpie. There it is there. That's the cover. And that was available in the back page. And he's done another one called My Chinese Experience, which is a personal story. So interesting. And hopefully we will be able to get him on at some point. But he is struggling with the technology and I'm not sure why. So if we can get him on in the next half hour, we will. As this was pre-recorded on Thursday, we do have some rather tragic news, and anyone who's on Twitter will be well aware of Martin. And Martin reached out for help on Twitter, put a rather distressing message on the other night to say that he was thinking about taking his own life, and I'm sad to say that Martin has passed away this evening. On Thursday. So Martin was a Newcastle fan. I didn't know him personally, but obviously, like a lot of the Newcastle United fans on Twitter and on social media, we all reached out to him. We all gave or tried to give him some advice as to what to do. But unfortunately, Martin has made his own choice and is no longer with us. So rest in peace, Martin. Newcastle United's heaven has another Newcastle fan up there, and let's hope that his family are okay and they can get through this tragic time. It's never a good time to lose a loved one, but on the build up to Christmas, it's not good. So rest in peace, Martin.
Absolutely, Steve. Absolutely. Yeah. That's why the Be a Game Changer program that the Newcastle United Foundation run is so important. You know, encouraging men who have issues to talk, and We can't say enough about that program. It's there. Some great people involved in it. Some great fans who have gone through their own personal issues with it in their own personal circumstances, who are supporting it. And it's a tremendous organisation. It's a tremendous campaign that the foundation are running. So if there is anyone out there who is struggling, needs to reach out, wants to reach out, please do so through the Be a Game Changer program. Just on the foundation website, just link to the Newcastle United own club website, and there's plenty of people on Twitter, if you put Be a Game Changer in, who are there as counsellors to give you the help and support that they would be more than help sort of want to give, because that's what it's all about. Please reach out if you have any problems, Steve.
Yeah, it is.
Can I add, there's also enough gobshites like us on Twitter, on YouTube, on social media, who are quite happy to have their DMs open to anybody who needs to reach out, and we all will, whether it's us, whether it's the lads and lasses at Gallagher Shots, whether it's the lads and lasses at the Trust or True Faith, whoever you feel comfortable putting a hand out to. I don't think the hand will be battered away. It will always be reached out to, because that's what we do as a fan base. When push comes to shove, we're there for each other, and that's the way it should be.
Well said, Mitch. Well said.
Yeah, it's tragic, tragic to hear of anyone, having to go through that. And as you say, we're all here. We're all, very, very contactable, and just a tragic end to that story, which I think a lot of the Newcastle United fan base were involved with in some way or form this week. And like we said, please reach out if you are feeling down or depressed. And like we did all of last month, we had our Phone a Friend campaign.
Yes.
I cannot emphasise how important it is to keep in touch with people during this pandemic. Steve, I want to talk a little bit about the food bank. We were up there this week to hand over £500 to the Newcastle West End Food Bank. That was the money from the Lee Clark Christmas do, which unfortunately didn't go ahead due to COVID. But yes, me and you popped up there, socially distanced, and handed over £500, which people left in, which was very, very kind of them. So yeah, Steve, I will play the video in a minute, but how's things going at the food bank? When we were up there, wow, I think first of all I was amazed at how many people were there just to drop things off and donate.
Yeah.
again, you know, it's tragic that we have to rely on food banks in this day and age. But there was a lot of people there as well, you know, going up to get, you know, essential items.
That's right. Yeah. And the thing is that nobody's immune from this, Steve. You know, people who have been working, you know, all their lives, suddenly being hit by COVID, suddenly being lost their jobs, and there's always been a situation right across the country where very, very few people have had the opportunity to save money. So you can last for only a very, very short period of time before you then start to struggle. And you know, we all know that everybody's circumstances are different, but we're seeing more and more demand for the food bank. We're seeing more and more families struggling, and the fact that we have a food bank out there, it does abhor me at times. The fact that as a community we need to have people having to rely on that. There's a campaign that's been started nationally by Ian Byrne. Ian Byrne's an MP for Liverpool West Derby, and Ian's says that everybody should have the right to food, and I don't think there's anyone in this country who could deny that. Everybody should have the right to food. And what Ian's trying to do is he's trying to have that put into legislation. He's trying to have that put into law, that everybody should have a right to food. And that's something that we're backing as part of our involvement with the fans food banks. And there are now fans food banks in a number of football clubs right across the country. And there's an excellent food bank being run in Newham with for West Ham fans, by West Ham fans, for their community. There's work being done with Manchester City fans, Manchester United fans, Leeds United, Huddersfield, Burnley, and the list goes on and on. And to a man or woman, when we've sat and we've had Zoom meetings talking about this and trying to help each other and passing on ideas, to a man and woman, we've all said that we wish we didn't have to do this. We wish we weren't having these Zoom calls. We wish that the situation was such that everybody was being supported by the state and everybody was getting what they needed. But unfortunately, that's not the situation. The whole benefit system, the way that it operates now, it's not like when either of us two or us three may have had to rely on when we've left school, signed on the door or something like that. It doesn't work like that. You know, it's not the boys from the black stuff anymore. Sometimes you can wait 12, 13 weeks for to get benefits. The benefits, people think that you get everything. You don't. You get the bare minimum to live on, you know. And it affects families, it affects single parents, it affects multiple families, families that live with grandparents, and so it goes on. So while it's there and the demand's there, and the West End Food Bank is being supported by Newcastle fans in the manner that they is, then it just shows what community is all about. Bill, who everybody knows, Bill Corcoran, he has his big flag with dignity written on. And that's what it's about, giving people back their dignity. Mm-hmm. And we as a community probably owe that to each other to make sure that we all stand there dignified. And, you know, if that means we need to badger and cajole and demand things from politicians and demand work to be done at government level, then so be it. And that's what Ian Byrne is trying to do with the legislation he's trying to bring in, and it's what Rob Daniels and the lads at Everton are doing as part of fan support and food banks. That's where we got our inspiration from, because they realised the need in their community. Just if you can support them, they're looking for volunteers, they're looking for drivers, they're looking for people who can do drop-offs and pick-ups of food that are being donated from places where perhaps they haven't got the transport. They're looking for food donations and they're looking for cash donations. So there's plenty there that we can do as a community to just keep this going. And especially while the pandemic is very much upon us and we're stuck in level 3 and more people are losing jobs, being made redundant, or are on furlough schemes and struggling financially, Steve.
Yeah, okay. Well, you're going to play the video that was put out by the food bank this week, but please help them if you can.
Hi everyone at Newcastle West End Food Bank. With thanks for all your help and the local community. the wicked was brilliant. So we wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
It was a pleasure to see you. I have a really good memory when I go to the food bank. So I just want to say to you, Merry Christmas, and I miss you a lot.
To everyone involved with the food bank, we just want to say congratulations on all the great work you've been doing. We hope you have a great Christmas, stay safe, and hopefully we'll be able to see you soon.
It's a difficult time for the food bank in general because they rely on a lot of donations to be able to provide food for people who cannot afford or people that are in very desperate situations. And as I said, usually with matches and things like that, they get a lot of donations, so it's been a bit difficult with no one being allowed to go to games, but they've been seemingly getting a lot of donations from a lot of nice general public. A few of the lads have been down there also with packages to help out, and the more that anyone can do to help, no matter how small or big, will be sufficient and would be helping them out a great deal.
Great stuff, fantastic work, and it's a great video, that, Steve, isn't it?
It's a great video, and we didn't ask for that. The lads put that together themselves, and all those players and many others have supported the food bank since we started it. Isaac was there right at the very, very beginning, and has been excellent. Other members of the club, the backroom staff, the directors, executives, all the way through the under-23 squad. They've come down on match days before. They've come down with Ben Dalton and the rest of the coaching staff, and they've been there on Strawberry Face. Probably people thought they were just stewards when they walked down, but I've seen all of those players. I've seen Paul Dummett turn up on a Saturday. Before, 1:30, 2 o'clock on a Saturday if he hasn't been involved in the first team. Alian was up there not long after he turned up at Newcastle United, because he knew, from a community point of view, how important it was and how much he wanted to put back into his community, because he knew what it was like in the community he lived in France. And both Longstaffs have just turned up, like other players have, and just dropped off a little plastic bag with food in, a few tins, little cash donation, and just waved and said, "All right," just like, just like you or I have done, Steve, on a match day. No publicity, not wanting, no fuss, no fanfare, no TV cameras or anything like that. Just walked up, just said hello, can I leave this with you, and off they went. And that's the measure of the first team squad. That's the measure of the footballers that we have that turn up and play for Newcastle United. And it's a measure of the executives within that football club as well at times. And there's a lot goes on behind the scenes that, they get an awful lot of criticism for. But there's an awful lot that they do in the community that just goes unsung. And I think, especially at this time of year, we need to think about that, and we need to give praise where it's due.
Yep, yeah.
Steve, that ties in with something I said on Twitter through the week about no matter what you think of the owner within the club, there are still some really good people who do really good things for us.
Yeah.
And I got a little bit of criticism for that, which I understand actually, because that's the way the whole divisive nature of the club's being run almost over the last 12 years certainly is where it goes. But there are still some really good people inside the club that care, and that includes some, to be fair, most of the playing squad.
Yeah.
And they do things for you guys without being asked about it. They just turn up, they just rock up. I've heard so many of you, Bill, Colin, other people associated with the food bank saying, well, such and such just rocked up.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be. That's the essence of Newcastle United, isn't it? That's the club city community thing that we'll all strive for. And it's still there. Yet the people that harness it is us, but also many people inside the club still. There's still a heartbeat there, which has got to give everybody hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other reason that we're not live tonight, of course, is we didn't want to do two double shifts. Not just that I'm out having my four man and woman soiree to God, talk about that as a Christmas do. It's just crazy. But we've also got the big launch of We Are the Geordies, which of course I've been promoting all week, and we've been pushing on the show for the last couple of weeks. But it's a big premiere tonight, and sadly it's not tuxedos and a glass of prosecco on arrival, Steve. It's online, sadly.
Okay. Yeah, you can still provide your own champagne and your own canapes if you want, and if you want to watch it tomorrow, there's plenty of links on Twitter and Facebook where you can book a slot. You know, we're going to be raising money for the food bank at the same time. And if you want to watch and you want to wear a black tie and tuxedo, then hey, why not? Make an evening of it. You know, we can't get out the house. Let's dress up and make an evening of it. And we're going to be having a premiere. George Colkin is our host tomorrow night. George was involved.
Well, it's tonight. It's tonight, Steve. Don't forget what pre-recording is to do. It's tonight.
Tonight, yeah. George is our host, and we've got we're going to have. Well, we're going to hear from a number of people about how the film was put together, and we're going to have actually an opportunity to watch the film. I've seen it myself this week. Sat down for the full 92 minutes. So it lasts 90 minutes plus the extra 2 while we waited for that result to come through with Aston Villa against Brighton. And the excitement and euphoria that came at the end of that. This is not a video of a match, by the way, for people. This is something totally different. This is something I've never seen before. This is the story of a football club, the love of a football club by supporters, why we love our football club. And I'll defy anybody who, after they've watched it, can't sit there and put themselves in the same seat and using the same words as the 11 people that were followed during that particular season. It sent a shiver down my spine watching it. The fact that we were in the football ground, I was watching fans enjoying themselves. I was watching euphoria in St James's Park, something that we mentioned last week that we've never had the opportunity to do since last March. And it's brought back what we've been missing. You know, it certainly brought back to me what I've been missing. I was quite nonplussed during the whole of this COVID situation about going back to St James's Park. I felt as though I wasn't missing it. I watched this film yesterday, and boy, do I want to get back into St James's Park again. And let's hope once we all get the vaccine and we all get the opportunity, which I think realistically is probably next season now, before we get anywhere near full houses. But if we can recreate what we've created in the past inside St James's Park, with flags and with excitement and with excitement on the pitch as well as off the pitch, and with, yes, the angst that goes with it. But you'll get your buzz back. After watching this film, you'll certainly get your buzz back.
No doubt about it, Mitch. It's we've talked about it on the show last week as well, but just great to see your dad involved in it, and obviously your little cameo role in it as well. But Steve's right, isn't it? It does. You know, Zara struggled massively with James to get this, you know, anywhere near where it is, you know, tonight with a premiere, but she's done it, and it's almost as if it's happened for a reason that this film has come out now when we've all been away from St James's Park for so long.
I did a little piece this week with the Arab News out here with a journalist, Ali Khaled, who was a big Liverpool fan and a big friend of Geordies, actually. He knows quite a lot of the Geordies out here and spends a lot of time with the Geordies out here. And so I tapped him up and said, look, can we get this film pushed in the region, please? And he was 200% behind it. And he picked up on that. He picked up on the whole poignancy of this has been released at quite an appropriate time when everybody is a football fan, himself included, just wants to be back in Anfield. He wants to be back in Anfield. He wants to be on a plane to Liverpool, to Manchester, cross on the train to Liverpool and go and see his team play. Because he's fortunate enough to be in a job that lets him do that on a regular basis. We want that. one of the first things you lads know, one of the first things I'll do once everything's back to normal is I'll be back on a bloody plane, and sod anything else. The first thing I'll do is I'll be in St James's Park. There's nothing.
The second thing, actually, the first thing you'll be in the Strawberry. The second thing will be St James's Park.
Well, yeah. Okay. Technicalities, Mr. Hasty. Technicalities. There's nothing I would like more than to walk through the turnstile. You could blindfold me, kidnap us, and stick us inside St James's Park, and I would tell you where I was. From the smell, the sound, the touch of the handrail up the stairs, I'd know exactly where I was. And do I miss it? Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely. And that's from, what, 4,000 miles away?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the fact that I'm 4,000 miles away, it's the fact that I'm 4,000 miles away and I can do sod all about getting back there at the moment.
Yeah.
And so what this film does, to see basically my dad being filmed in the seat I should be sat in next to him, yeah, hurts. But also fills us with joy.
Yeah.
Also fills us with joy and hope and all the things. And you guys will see what I've put up with all my life.
I make no apologies for showing. I'm not going to just show one, but I'm going to show both clips. First of all, this one, which is captures the atmosphere brilliantly. The atmosphere, which of course we're all missing.
For me, I say it's a challenge more than a problem, because you have to perform, you have to do well, and for our player it has to be the same. So we have to go there with the idea that this is a normal game, try to get 3 points, but the atmosphere will be so hot that we have to enjoy more than have problems with that.
Great stuff, and that captures the atmosphere. And of course, one of our NUFC Matters regulars, the man who started the show with me a couple of seasons ago when we tried it out, Super Mac, talking about the Newcastle United fans.
I came from Luton to here, and I think our highest gate in a league match was something like about 8,500 people. And I came here and it was a full house, over 50,000. And I scored the first goal, which equalised Liverpool's goal. This is on my home debut, and at one each, with about 10 or 12 minutes to go before half time, Terry Hibbett slid a beautiful ball through to me, and I turned and went round Larry Lloyd all in one movement and cracked it across into the far top corner past Ray Clements. And there, the players went wild and the crowd went wild. And as we started running back to the halfway line to get the game restarted, everybody in unison, in the whole ground, other than the Liverpool supporters, that is, the few that were there, everybody started singing, and it was from the hit song at the time in London, Jesus Christ Superstar, but the words were changed. And they were singing Supermax Superstar, how many goals have you scored so far? And I thought, how do 50,000 people all around the stadium know the words to a song that's never been written? You know, were they handing song sheets out before the game? And that's the magic of Newcastle United supporters, and I've never met it anywhere else in this country or around the world, wherever I've gone to play football.
Great stuff, and honestly, that film, I've already seen some of the reviews coming in on social media, and I'm looking forward to seeing it myself. But it's fantastic, and well done to Zara, well done to James. So pleased that they managed to get it this far, and hard work and determination, and a little help from your friends goes a long way in this life. And she's got plenty of friends, as she knows, and I'm glad that we've been able to give it plenty of promotion. So if you haven't already bought it, please buy it, please book it, please download it, all the usual streams. Get yourself a DVD. There's nothing better than a good old-fashioned DVD anyway. But yeah, go to wearethegeordies.com and order yours today. Go on, Mitch.
We know the blood, sweat and tears that have gone into that. Quite literally. Quite literally. Because we sometimes have been the one, listening to the problems and trying to help them solve it. And to see their passion project, the thing that they've chucked so much into, in every way you can imagine, in every way you can chuck something into something, they've done it.
Yeah.
And to see it at this point and to get it global exposure, oh yeah, that's brilliant. And I'll cheerlead for them all day long.
And well done to Newcastle United as well for cooperating with them and helping them do it, because we can knock Newcastle plenty times. We're well done to the likes of Lee Marshall at the club, who's a bit of an unsung hero in my old position as fans liaison officer, of course. And he does everything. He's fans liaison officer, bottle washer, media man, you name it. He's done quite a few jobs since he came to the club. But one thing he has been a pretty good friend to a lot of the supporters. It's a hard job to be. It's a hard job to be someone who is involved at the football club in his position and balance and act between the hierarchy and the fans. But if everybody was as good as Lee Marshall, things probably would have been a lot better under Mike Ashley.
Absolutely, 100%. I've had the pleasure of having a couple of pints with him over here, because he's got family over here, and he took time out from a holiday to come and have a couple of beers with me. Who the hell am I at the end of the day, really? But that's the kind of thing he does. And I see some very unfair things said about him, and that's got to stop, and it's got to stop now. That's a guy who was 100% behind the club, 100% with the fans, and if you engage with him in a manner that is right and proper, you'll get that back all day long.
Yeah. Steve, I'm sure you'll agree with that as well. You've had lots of dealings with Lee over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. As genuine as the day is long. And a great lad. And I know that the effort and the hard work that him and his media team put in. I know the hard work he did when he first started, and how important he saw the role of the fans liaison officer. The work that we did to try and get the fans forum started. It took 18 months of pushing and cajoling, and him doing the work behind the scenes with the football club to get us to that point. Yeah. And that's it. That's very, very important. And I think people have forgotten that when push comes to shove, a lot of the work that the fans forum did and a lot of the answers the fans forum got, eventually, because of even Newcastle United had its own lockdown, didn't it? It had its own media lockdown for years. And even the fans, the press, at one point relying on the answers that the fans forum to the questions the fans forum raised.
Steve, there was times even the press officer didn't know what the hell was going on. When I think about the St James's Park and Crowbar incident,
Right.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. But he's a great lad. But there are many other unsung heroes at the football club that deserve the credit. Getting back to the film, what people don't realise is there's an awful lot of work went following fans around the country. It's not just filming sites in James's Park that we've seen on the little clips. Whether it was Huddersfield or Brighton or Blackburn, James and Zara and the crew, they went everywhere. They went on train trips with supporters. They went in their own cars. They went with other supporters in their cars. They went on the coaches with the fans from on the GH Travel and the back page. They went on trips all around the country, and you'll see that in the footage. As the film progresses, because it's literally a story stepping through the full season of the promotion. You know, I don't think people realise how important it was for that club, for our club, to go up first time. If we hadn't have gone up first time, I dread to think where we would have been. And there were times during that season where it didn't look like we were going to make it. You know, there were times where we went through some bad periods. The time over Christmas where we struggled to put results together. Time when Rafa was asking for players in January that he didn't get. You know, the disappointment that Rafa had to suffer, and the rest of the squad had to suffer when he didn't get the promises that were made coming to fruition, or the promises that he anticipated coming to fruition, for one reason or another. And we don't go into the whys and wherefores. We just see the impact that it had at that particular time, and then how the squad then regrouped, and how it got through to actually, you know, connecting and getting promotion, and then that final day and that euphoria of that final day where it takes you, and having that story through the said and told through the fans is, as I said right at the very beginning, anyone who doesn't feel the hairs on the back of their neck standing up and getting a tear in their eye at some point during that 92 minutes, then they really need to take a look at themselves, quite frankly, because they've got something emotionally wrong with them. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I mean it in a very very pleasant way. But it's get the DVD and you'll experience it, and you can come back and tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, good luck to James and Zara tonight, and hope everybody who tunes in enjoys it. And let's hope there's a few more quid made for the food bank. Slightly shorter show this week, as I say, with it being a pre-record. Just going to look ahead to Newcastle United against West Brom. I'm glad to say that we have got a game this weekend, and it's a 3:00 kickoff on a Saturday. And as we're pre-recording this, lads, obviously we haven't had Steve Bruce's press conference, but I think the only question I really want to ask you about that is, Mitch, I'd like to see him, if he can, I suppose, remain with a 4-4-2, and you know, if Joe Linton and Callum Wilson are both fit, then potentially start them up front, because the team we're playing concedes goals like they're going out of fashion. So you know, this is a time really for playing on the front foot, and essentially getting the getting the goals that we need to win this game. You know, we should really attack West Brom tomorrow.
Should do. But, you know, is he going to roll the random wheel of death and put people in bloody different positions? Who knows? I hope not. Yeah, I'm with you. You know, let's work with it. It worked against Crystal Palace. Yeah, we you know, again it comes back to the smash and grab at the end of it. Or that may be controversial to say that at the moment, given last week's conversation. Who knows? But, you know, given the way it worked out in the end, you've got to say Joe Linton and Wilson looked comfortable together up front. And it looked like it worked, amongst other things. And West Brom have looked vulnerable at times this season. They're a little bit swashbuckly. You know, they'll go for it, but then they concede. And so we should, if we set up the same way, there's no reason why we can't at least look to put the goalkeeper under a bit of pressure if we've got two strikers. So yeah, I'd be all for that. I'd be all for sticking with that formation. But obviously that depends on who's fit, who's had COVID, who hasn't, who's available. It looks like the press seem to be touting Richie for this game all of a sudden out of nowhere. It makes me wonder, is that because they know that people who would be in the team are missing because of COVID, and he's now back to fitness and he's one of the options we'll have? I don't know. I like Matt Ritchie. I like him in the team because he gives a shit.
Yeah, me too, Steve.
At the end of the day, he gives a shit.
He's right.
Let's be honest about it.
He is right, Steve, isn't he? Matt Ritchie is somebody who grafts, and you know, he's one of my favourite players at the club. But unfortunately, you know, Rafa always used to take him off. occasionally dropped him, but Bruce has been a little bit wishy-washy with him, hasn't he? It's certainly not his favourite player.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had that injury early doors that knocked him for 6. But I mean, Bruce brought him on at Palace. He came on, and I'm not saying he turned the game, but certainly his presence allowed Joe Linton to actually work that front line across the front line. He didn't just concentrate on the left-hand side, and I think that, if anything, unsettled and unnerved the Palace back four. And I think when you were talking there about how well Wilson and you felt Wilson and Joe Linton worked, I think having a Richie coming in on the left-hand side did free up Joe Linton to that extent, to allow him to push on a little bit, but then not just concentrate on like an inside left position or an inside right. Yeah. He moved and he worked around Wilson. And Wilson's an intelligent footballer anyway, and Wilson knows that, if he sees Joe Linton, if he makes a run and he can drag people out, then he's going to make the space for Joe Linton. And that's what happened with the second goal. They interacted well. They played the nice little 1-2, the nice little passing game, and then made the space for each other. And we got the rewards with the goal, the second goal. So, yeah, I can understand exactly why you feel as though you're staying with a back four, staying with a solid 4 midfield, and staying with the 2 up front. Let's see how it works. What will be interesting is if we'd managed to do that, and we have got most of the players that were there in the last game, is that we're then starting to put something together. Maybe that's what Bruce has been lacking. Maybe he hasn't had the personnel, or he hasn't had the opportunity to put that together. Putting out the same team, putting out the same formation, just maybe even if he has to change 1 or 2, but the formation's exactly the same, but they've worked on it. I was going to say they've worked on it in training. They haven't been turning up on training. They've worked on it by Zoom. Is that how they do it?
Zoom. Classic. Okay, quick one, lads. Predictions. Mitch, your prediction for the game against West Brom tomorrow?
2-1 us.
2-1. Okay, Steve, you?
West Brom cannot. They're leaking goals for fun, struggling to score. I'm going to go 2-0.
2-0. Okay, I'm going to go for a 2-0 win as well. And great stuff, lads.
And Stuart Penman will have 3-1.
He will.
3-1, yeah, you will do, yeah. As always, we will play out with our video for our campaign. Think before you tweet. And as I mentioned on last night's show, the documentary is now finished. It runs at 2 hours. We just want to get one last little thing finalised, which is the music which we're going to use for it. We've got a big name star who is very behind this campaign and is, I think, going to allow us to use one of his songs, which we'll hopefully confirm over the weekend. But yeah, it will be released on the 15th. As I say, a 2-hour documentary, really pleased with it. But we're just saying, think before you tweet, be a little bit kinder on social media, and just try and, be a bit more supportive to people. And social media is such a good thing. It can be used for so many positive things. We've seen the work that we've done and other people have done with the food bank, for instance, amongst the fan base. And social media should be used in that way. We can be a very supportive bunch when we want to be. We're just asking people to think before the tweet. Steve, Mitch, I'll let you go and get your hair done for the film premiere. Enjoy it tonight, lads, and we'll see you next week. Take care, lads.
Take care, everyone.